Good evening. Welcome to a special meeting of the Town of Los Gatos Town Council for the purpose of a study session. Would the town clerk do the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor Steve Rice.
Here. Would you all please stand and join me in the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The purpose of this evening's meeting is a study session for the Town Council to provide discussion and direction on the development of a vision for an area known commonly as the North 40. As a study session, no final or decisive action can be taken tonight, but direction can be given to staff or advisory bodies like the Planning Commission, the General Plan Advisory Committee, and or the North 40 Specific Plan Committee. First, I'd like to ask you all to put your cell phones on silent or turn them off. And then if you are going to want to speak on an item if you want to speak on any item this evening, either on the agenda or off the agenda, in the back of the bench in front of you are kind of buff-colored cards, and I'll ask that you fill those out at this time and submit them to the clerk on my left, your right, and then we will call on you at the appropriate time. We start this evening with verbal communications, which is for items that are not on this evening's agenda. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak on an item that is not on this evening's agenda, even though I don't have cards yet, since I just told you about them? Well, you can fill them out after the fact. Don't all rush to the mic at once. Okay, I see none. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and move on with the process for developing the vision. I'm going to ask for the staff report, and that will be presented by Director of Community Development, Wendy Rooney.
Maybe I'll just tee it up beforehand, if we may, Mr. Mayor and Council, and I see a comment card coming in.
Let's go ahead with the staff report, and then we'll do public comment after that.
Perfect. We've given you an extensive packet. It includes mostly materials you've seen previously, including prior directions on the general plan, the guiding principles, a draft vision that was prepared a long time ago in the origination of the North 40 specific planning process, the results from various gathering inputs that the council has done with the Planning Commission and the General Plan Advisory Committee, as well as with community forums. And in addition, we've given you a set of exercises to go through, and I want to greatly appreciate the council for getting in drafts of those so we could consolidate and analyze them this afternoon to present for you. So what I wanted to share with you is first, the director is going to present some of the background and reference materials that will be available to you on the screen if you want to call upon it during your conversation. And then I will come forward to the lower podium to present the results of the visioning exercise that you have gone through. And so first, Wendy, can you reference the materials available?
I can. Good evening, Mayor and council members. We do have a couple of slides for you to help facilitate this visioning session. In addition to the materials that were included in your packet that the town manager referenced, we also have a slide that shows the entire North 40 area. We have the next slide shows the North 40 in context of the greater Los Gatos area, and as you can see, the North 40 is outlined in yellow up in the upper right-hand corner. And then the next slide we have are the 15 principles that are included in our 2020 general plan in regards to the development of the North 40 site. And then we have the final two slides are the results, and we put the top 4 priorities from the March 2011 Town Council, Planning Commission, and North 40 Advisory Kickoff Meeting, where we took the council, the group, through a process of visioning for these areas, and we have land use, we have architectural character, we have public spaces, we have transportation and miscellaneous issues. And so these are the top 4 priorities, noting that some may be tied. And then we have the same document in the same format for the community meeting that occurred in April, about a week after the joint meeting, where the community went through the same process. And so again, these are their top 4 priorities in each of those topics, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. I did also want to note that you did receive an addendum item, and that was a public comment letter that should be included with your materials tonight. And that will be it.
So the council has set for itself an interesting challenge in a public process, which is to craft a vision to provide further direction to the Planning Commission, the North 40 Specific Plan Advisory Group, and to your staff in terms of further efforts on the North 40 Specific Plan development. We've given you the abundance of materials and have some of them available here on the slide. And we've also sent out in the staff report 2 types of visioning exercises. These are standard tools that are used by public groups, nonprofit groups, and private groups to try to come up with a vision statement. One of them goes from broad outlines and works down to the specifics, knowing that some thought processes, it's easiest to start at a 50,000-foot level and to work down to a 20 to 30,000 foot level, as much specificity as possible. And that's what the first set of exercises described in the staff report was intended to do. The second set is to move from more specific issues and to try to build up to the 30,000 foot level of what a vision should be. And we have asked the council to provide kind of first draft submittals for that, which we've aggregated in handouts that are available for you as well as for the audience, and the summaries will be presented on the screen. The first set of exercises, moving from broad to specific, really asks the council and the public to describe in 50 words or less 3 different areas of Los Gatos. The first was to describe Los Gatos as a whole. The second was to describe your own neighborhood. And then the third would be to describe the North 40 years after it has been developed. We will walk through the results of that exercise now. So, describing Los Gatos. These are from the submittals from the council. And what we've done is, on the sheets that are being handed out, we've actually listed everything that was submitted on the top of the page. And then we just did a word analysis this afternoon. What were the common concepts, words, and themes that were mentioned in your submittals? So what you'll see is, in describing Los Gatos, the highest one that was mentioned by 4 members of the council was a friendly social meeting place, a community, a small town feel. And that's an area, those are all words or variations of those words each of you used in your description of Los Gatos. Second, the second tier of most frequently mentioned items were foothills or mountains. The next was that it's unique, non-duplicable, irreplaceable was the third category. Our downtown and vibrant business community was the 4th set of attributes used to describe. And then beautiful, beauty, gem, you'll all see those words listed both above on the sheets we've given you as well as in the count below. And then, interestingly, neighborhoods was the last of this tier, where the fact that we have well-defined, cohesive, planned, and unique neighborhoods throughout Los Gatos. We then have on the right column just a number of words or concepts that were used by less than a majority of the council to describe Los Gatos in your submittals, but still they were used by more than one of you. We've also provided in the handouts you have kind of unique references, words, concepts that were listed by just one of you. So I'm going to take a pause here before going on to the next to make sure the process and how we've tried to take your information to identify similarities and convergence, as we've called it, as well as unique references. So what you and the public are seeing on this slide is council was asked, how do you describe Los Gatos? You each submitted your own definition, less than 50 words. Some were phrases, some were paragraphs, some were just series of adjectives. There were no rules on that. We then looked at the commonalities, and you see those commonalities reflected up on the screen. I believe showing a fairly high degree of convergence in terms of how you would each describe Los Gatos. Move on to the next question, which was, how would you describe your own neighborhood? And how is it different from other neighborhoods? When presenting you with this exercise, I actually thought we'd get more divergence here, and I was surprised how there was a lot of convergence as well on this. So again, each council member submitted adjectives, paragraphs, phrases, or in one case, a single word to describe your own neighborhood. And what came out as most common was, I need to shift, sorry. Being in or near downtown, close to downtown, at the gateway of downtown. 3 to 4 of you mentioned your own neighborhood as meeting that aspect. 3 of you mentioned the walkability of your neighborhood. 3 of you mentioned the natural attributes, be it woodsy, having redwood trees, creek, wildlife, topography that's unique, or open space. 2 of you cited the historic character of your neighborhood. 2 of you cited that it's comfortable, affluent, safe, and friendly, kind of mush that into a single concept in a sort of factor analysis. And then the last was a variety of architectural styles and mixes and non-traditional, as well as changing, a neighborhood going through a renaissance. And that really dealt more with the built style of the neighborhood. So those were the commonalities in describing your own neighborhood. So those were really tee-ups to the big question, which was, how would you describe the North 40 years after it's been built? And that was the third part of this broad to specific visioning exercise. And in terms of describing the North 40 years after it's been developed, overwhelmingly, you mentioned a focus on unmet needs, services which are not currently available, complementary but not competitive with other neighborhood and town needs. So that was overwhelmingly the highest one. The next was the neighborhood or the North 40 should grow organically. Look at it if it has been there for many years. Respect its historical legacy. And that was a set of answers that met that. And in a few places on these slides where staff had to use a judgment call whether or not to include one in the language up above, we've tried to reflect it as we have here, that it could be viewed as 3 of you referenced that category, or it could be 4 of you referenced that categories when you look at the words above the page that were actually submitted above at the top of the page I've given you. Third area was that the North 40 should complete Los Gatos, not exist as an isolated island, but be connected with and part of Los Gatos. Very similar, and in fact, the second, third, and fourth ones, the last 3 in the left-hand column, all had some overlapping dimensions to them, in that it should have the look and feel and density of other neighborhoods, quote unquote, a new neighborhood not unlike others. So I think that's really a set. And if you combine the second, third, and fourth on the left column, all 5 of you mentioned those in some context. Moving over to the right-hand column, the North 40 should not overburden the town streets, and linked into that was that it should be accessible and walkable. Two of you specifically cited for the North 40 that it should maintain mountain views or respect the town's hillside settings. And then in one where we kind of mushed two together, but we were looking to try to create convergence, not have a lot of unique references, we did combine respect for the North 40's agricultural heritage as well as the preservation of many trees, and we thought there could be a link there that two of you shared on that item. So in terms of what this exercise led us to, in terms of helping you craft a vision for the North 40, is, I think, two big messages. One, unmet needs for the community, and how do we make the North 40 complementary and not competitive with the balance of the town. You'll find on the next exercise you had different definitions of unmet needs, so we will probe that as we go through the next exercise. But clearly, that was a strongly held feeling by the council. And then the second broad area is that it needs to be part of Los Gatos, not a standalone island. It needs to grow organically, respect the rest of the town and what the town brings and feels like. That it will be a new neighborhood, but it will still be part of Los Gatos. And I think that's the second big takeaway as you move after these exercises to the hard work of crafting a vision. Stop before going on to the second exercise. Any questions, takeaways, thoughts on these first three questions? Okay. Question 2A and 2B try to move from the specific to the broad. The specific is actual land uses that could exist in the North 40. And we started with that question as the specific because the community, through the North 40 Advisory Committee, has basically spent about a year talking about possible uses in the North 40. And while the council and the Planning Commission were clear in their direction on January 9th that the next step is to go to crafting a vision, knowing that people approach these issues in different ways, the task we structured for you was, what are uses you see may exist in the North 40? Knowing that's not the real question to be answered tonight. The real question is, why are those uses appropriate for the North 40? To try to elevate the discussion from the specific use to the broader vision. And that's what the second question really asked you to do. So it was, what uses or attributes should be in the North 40 and why? This is the actual ranking of the uses you listed. And again, this is the least important of this question, but it informs the next one. But clearly, the strongest was for a hotel, conference, meeting center space. Second was for residents serving retail. Third was for senior housing with performing arts space being either as part of the hotel conference center or as standalone, with the possibility for some regional retail. And you'll see later in this exercise, this is kind of mid-level retail, not big box, not a large Santana Row-like development, with the lowest use being office uses, including medical uses. And that's what you said, and you'll find this on the back of the page labeled 2A, where you'll see convergence in uses on the left, as well as unique references such as a school or an indoor sports complex. What becomes more interesting and relevant for the visioning discussion are the reasons you listed for why those uses should be in the North 40. And clearly, number one, mentioned by all of you, were unmet needs for the town as a whole. So it's not just unmet needs generically. This is the town of Los Gatos' unmet needs for the whole community. The next one was neighborhood-specific unmet needs. where it was the neighborhood serving retail would fit in that category. Regional unmet needs was then listed lower by some of you, and this was to serve a broader Silicon Valley or broader than Los Gatos need. So this really starts to parse the unmet needs. And for the council member who submitted unmet needs alone without any parsing, we included your count in all three of these because we didn't know how to differentiate it. So you're one of the 3, 4, and 5 where you just said unmet needs in general. Also mentioned by a majority of the council was the changing demographics of our community, particularly as boomers age and the growth of an active senior population that may be ready to downsize their residential property, but not their quality of life or their access to the amenities and character of Los Gatos. And then last was proximity to related uses. And if you look at some of the text actually provided above, a perfect example of this is proximity to Good Samaritan and other medical offices. That's one of the examples of proximity being a Y in terms of your answer. So these were the uses and attributes that should be in the North 40, where we've tried to take your thinking not just from the specific land uses, but to rise up to the question of why. What should the North 40 fulfill as a broader visioning statement?
We have a question, so go ahead, Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, because I'm trying to scan through all of this and see, but on the summary, the senior housing, residential, is that senior housing and senior residential or residential general?
I need to go back to the tally sheets. It's listed as 3 to 4 because one of these submittals had senior housing as a question mark. And so it was unclear if it was being proposed or questioned. It was all senior housing specifically, though, senior housing, senior residential. A variety of product types were listed throughout, however.
Okay, but not
generic
generic residential. Okay,
not
thank you.
generic residential. Now, the last one exercise we gave you is kind of the flip side of 2A, and it's not surprisingly labeled 2B. And this is where you are asked to again start at the specific. What are the uses that should not be in the North 40? Or what are the attributes you don't want to see in the North 40? And then the more important question was, why did you believe that? So here's what came out. Multifamily residential, separate from senior, which you'll remember from the prior slide was a high use in. Other multifamily residential was your largest, the greatest majority of the council cited as not existing in the North 40. A big super regional retail center, the kind of the big box approach, was the next one that the majority of the council mentioned should not be there. Movie theaters and multiplexes, as well as Santana Row office uses, and anything that would be a high-rise and block views were also where you shared perspective of what's not appropriate for the North 40. So these were the uses and attributes that you thought should not be in the North 40. But getting to the more important question of when you answered why on that, it was so that you didn't want the North 40 to compete with downtown. And related to that, particularly on office uses, is you felt that use was already provided in town elsewhere. So the downtown is listed separately because it was listed by use separately. It could be a subset of the second one, but in what you submitted, as you'll see on the sheets you've received, you broke it out. The third one, competition beyond the town, was particularly for the multiplex, the movie theater. Some concern that there's enough provided around the town and it would be competition beyond the town. There was also having a separate performing arts venue rather than one associated with the hotel would be viewed as competing beyond the town with Mountain View and elsewhere. Traffic was mentioned by a majority of the council in various reasons why you ruled things out of the North 40, and then just a general concern of too much density. So all of this, these two exercises combined, and I think it would be helpful to flip between 1C and 2AY and 2BY as the key slides that really start to converge to provide, I think, good fodder for the council to discuss what is an appropriate vision for the North 40 that all of you could embrace and craft and provide direction to staff, the North 40 Advisory Committee, and the Planning Commission to proceed with the specific plan. So just to summarize those again, in describing North 40, unmet needs, complementary, not competitive. The next three all go together, kind of as part of Los Gatos, not isolated from Los Gatos, and it doesn't overburden the town streets. Again, the focus on unmet needs and further narrowing that is what are the town-wide unmet needs? Secondarily, what are the neighborhood, the North Los Gatos unmet needs? And in a clear third, what are the regional unmet needs? Recognizing part of the definition of those unmet needs is our changing demographics. And why are there uses you did not want in downtown? It's because it competes with downtown or is already provided in the town or competes beyond the town in a way that's not necessary or helpful, and it might cause additional traffic that would be unacceptable to the community. So that is the results from your visioning exercises, which will hopefully help the council enter into a conversation about what are the priorities for the North 40. As the council will recall, staff was not coming in, given the prior direction, with proposed vision statements. We start the hard work now of trying to craft a vision statement collectively in public.
Thank you, Manager. Any questions of the manager? Okay, what I'm going to do at this point is we're going to go to public comment. Throughout the last year plus of this process, we have encouraged, sought, and listened to public comment on the North 40. And tonight's not going to be any exception. So what I'd like to do is ask anybody that is interested in speaking on this evening to please fill out a card, bring it to the clerk on my left, your right, and we'll have time for public comment before the council gets into additional discussion. And at the moment, I have one card, and I still can't pronounce it. Don Capobres.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the Planning Commission, and members of the public. I'm Don Capobres with Grosvenor. We obviously have a clear interest in the North 40 process, and as we've told many of you, we over time have respected that this is the town's process and putting a specific plan together. Obviously, we're very interested in the outcome of this process and have some parameters that we need to be cognizant of as we evaluate where the town's at and matching that up with our business plan overall. I'm merely here to let you know that both Alan Chamorro, the general manager of our San Francisco office, and I are available here tonight to answer any questions if you have them. But we are obviously watching very closely and very interested in the deliberations tonight. We do appreciate that this meeting came together very quickly after the January 9th session. And again, we're very interested in what you have to say and look forward to working with you as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Capobres? Seeing none. I see a card coming. Mr. Arzi.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for putting this together. At the last time I spoke, I hoped that the Los Gatos Boulevard would be part of tonight's talking issue, but apparently it's not. It's conspicuously absent. If we drive up and down the boulevard now, we see more medical office buildings. We see the AAA taking over retail. You're just giving away our retail tax base by not cohesively planning this along with the North 40, and I hope that you will consider that. The term village has been used way too much in the information of those 100 pages that were on the internet, and that really scares me. Again, I brought up many times when I personally sat on the General Plan Review Committee, the term that we liked a lot when describing the North 40 was more of the same. What do we want at the North 40? We want more of the same. And I think we've done that tonight. The list that I've seen from the town manager shows me that you're really on the right path, that we don't want a Santana Row, that we don't want a separate village, that we want to protect our heritage and our community. There's a lot of lessons in Santa Clara Valley that we need to look back on and remind ourselves of what happened. When Valley Fair moved out, we lost the 3 major department stores in downtown San Jose, and downtown San Jose became a blighted area before the term blighted was even invented. There was no attention paid to Stevens Creek, and there was no attention paid to San Carlos Street. Look at those 2 boulevards today and think about what we're doing to our boulevard. I don't see much difference, and hopefully you'll incorporate the boulevard as part of your planning process, our vision process. I don't see them as separate items. Last but not least, I want to suggest that the North 40 is not a panacea for all our unmet needs. We need to zero in on what we can accomplish and what we can support, and not everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card is Diana Abadi.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Diana Abadi, the superintendent of the elementary school district, and I just wanted to say that, first of all, I'm compelled to say this. I'm a little bit surprised that in some of the feedback there was nothing about the schools and K-12, not just the elementary. Just because when I see some of the feedback, and fairly being new here to the town, it talks about neighborhood, small feeling, and when I think about neighborhood, and again, I'm an educator, I think that the heart and soul of a neighborhood is a school, and it brings people together. So I just needed to say that. And I also wanted to update the council when we talk about development and what it does to schools. The last time I came on January 9th, I had said that there were 29 new students that came over the holidays. We now are up to 41 new students, and that Google bust hasn't really helped at this point. So I just wanted you to know that that's 41 to date since January 9th. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Amy Despars.
Hi, my name's Amy Despars. I've stood before you many times. I'm the representative of Live Oak Manor Park, probably the last neighborhood on Los Gatos Boulevard before the North 40, and I stand before you again just asking to really consider what you are putting not only on the boulevard but in North 40. It has to go together. This whole vision has to work together, because right now we just lost our retail restaurant to medical. After about maybe a month ago, that decision was made here. And unfortunately, that was part of the vision. That was going to make it a walking neighborhood. So we could go from Trader Joe's on to the next, but now it's a medical dental building. And so I'm just standing here as a parent, as a teacher, as a second-generation citizen here in Los Gatos, asking for you to really, really think about what you're doing and what you're going to put there and make sure it benefits everyone. I know people do task force. I respect that you are the town council, but I've never done this process before. I've never seen how it works, but a task force with town council, with planning commission, with educators, with senior citizens, and maybe people in surrounding communities, and a task force really looking at what our vision, not just for the boulevard, but for our town. I think there's some areas that we really need to look at and think and be creative, and really creative with land use. And I just really hope that you think about that as you're going through this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Dean.
Hi there, members of the council, Mayor. My name is Jeffrey Dean. I'm fairly new to the town. I was debating actually whether I was going to say anything. And in fact, the superintendent of the elementary schools actually got up and said something. And my point was going to be directly to her, what she said, which is, I've had a conversation with her about the schools and what they kind of need to be, to grow and expand and whatnot in the town of Los Gatos. And I think one of the things they really need is what she told me, which is they need 4 acres. They just need 4 acres. If we do 4 acres for them, we have 40. 10% of that, do 4 acres, give them a school. My daughter can go to school in Los Gatos. I don't have to worry about it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Matthew Hudis.
Council members, I am very encouraged about the process and the discussion earlier that we will get to a very good vision statement that will give direction to the North 40. I wanted to make some remarks about what's next and a suggestion about some steps that follow this development of a vision statement. I think that it would be important to have checkpoints like this along the way, and that following the creation of the vision statement, we develop a strategic direction document that talks about ranges that correspond to the vision, and then following that, a conceptual design, and then following that, a specific design, and then following that, an implementation plan that suggests some phasing. And I think by proceeding in a stepwise manner and getting agreement along the way, we can stay on track with this. The other thing I'd like to encourage is in the next steps with this is to develop an economic balance analysis so that we look not only if there is retail in the North 40, not only what that retail will generate in terms of potential lost revenue, but also what potential negative or positive impact that could have in other parts of the town. Also looking at an analysis of the school population and what kind of resources would be necessary as part of that as well. So just a few suggestions in what to do once we finish this visioning.
Thank you. Thank you. Woody, is it Needham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. When I was on the Revision Commission in 1997, we prepared a questionnaire which was distributed to the town of Los Gatos asking what they would like to see in the North 40. That wasn't part of our charge at the time, but there was a tremendous response from the populace, which was very heartening. They wanted to see open space. There were a lot of different things, but it was very much along the lines of what you folks mentioned in the summary by the town manager. And these same things were mentioned, by the way, at the very first public meeting we had on the North 40 this year. And things like small town, foothills, beautiful, woodsy, creek, wildlife, historic, agricultural legacy. These were very important in 1997. They were very important at the first public meeting that we had on the North 40. And I see that they're very important to you, too, and I'm very heartened by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other cards? Please bring them forward. If you want to speak, we'd love to have your input, but please fill out the cards and go ahead and come on to the mic, please, ma'am. Go ahead and fill those out and get them into the clerk so we have them. Thank you.
Good evening.
Mary Roach?
Yes, good
Okay.
evening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for soliciting our information. I've been going to several of these meetings, and this afternoon I downloaded and printed out the specific plan for North 40, and this thing is from 1999, and it says specifically in here, no residential buildings on this property, so I think this is a little antique. I am concerned because for open space, I'm concerned for the school impact, because you're putting lots of housing on here, and our schools are already very full, and we're already voluntarily taxing ourselves to support our schools, and yet now parents are being asked to put in additional cash per child to help the schools because we're so crowded and we're so underfunded from the economy. But we put in, or you put in, a lot of housing developments there. Everybody, one of the big draws to Los Gatos is the school system. And our schools are already plumb chuck full. I'm worried also because I really like the open space. This is our last territory. It will look like sin, I'm afraid, from every aspect, especially from the freeway. I'm just dreading the loss of all those trees. I don't see open space in the plans of the previous meetings that I've been to, nothing like I would really consider an open space. I'm worried about the impact of the traffic. I'm also wondering what's happening over, nobody talks about it, but are we putting more over there and more and more? Another last worry, is that even part of it? I'm concerned that the retail section seems to be in the Campbell section, and the residential is right here in Los Gatos. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. But, you know, when I think of a plaza or a paseo, I think of the Roman plazas, you know, large, have big spaces, so we can actually get together. We asked at a meeting for, you know, places where you can have farmer markets, large. I didn't see anything of that type. Didn't see any plans for buildings that we could rent or use for community art shows or weekend activities for families to be involved with. I saw small things, small areas saying, well, that's the plaza. You know, it was undersized. I just am going to really miss that open space. We asked for a park, we asked for something, put a school in so that we're not, you know, overburdening the classes we already have. And please, don't make it tall. Let's remember that we all like the mountains around here. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Briones?
Good evening. I'm Karen Briones, and I too live in Live Oak Manor with Amy Despars. And well, I think my biggest concern right now, and just would like to voice that, is the traffic not only along the boulevard, but it will also impact the traffic along Lark and Winchester. And since I do travel those areas quite a bit, and my husband travels in that direction every day for work, those are some major concerns, is how we're going to get people in and out of that area, and how we're going to provide safety in and out of that area, and who's going to be providing that. So that's what I'd like you to keep in mind as we go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, again, I have no cards. I don't see anybody rushing to the microphone. Or do I? You can fill one out afterwards, but just please introduce yourself when you get to the microphone.
Mayor, City Council members, my name is Warren Berry. I'm a business agent, Local 393 Plumbers and Steam Fitters here in Santa Clara County and San Bernardino County. I represent some 2,300 members. I'm here tonight, my first time at this meeting here for this 40 here. I would like to ask, is this going to put any citizens here in the city of Los Gatos to work, or how's this project going to work? That's my question.
Well, this isn't really a question and answer type of a format.
I'm sorry, I thought that's what it was.
Not really. We were happy to take input, and if there's something that staff, what we're trying to do is essentially craft a vision for what will be on a potential development, and I don't think details like that are really fleshed out at this particular point in time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, because we've all been discussing the North 40 so much for so long, I didn't provide in the introduction just kind of the basics for the viewing audience or new attenders to our discussions. First, the North 40 is almost entirely privately owned land. Neither the town nor the school district own any of the land. So any use of that property for a school, park, open space would require acquisition from the private property owner. What the town is doing through its specific plan process is taking the general plan guidance that the council approved just 2 years ago and bringing it down to a more specific direction so that the property owner and owners of the North 40 can determine what to submit as applications for future development on the site, subject to the town's guidance, knowing that the town doesn't own the land, it's privately owned.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Okay, last call for public comment. I'm going to go ahead and close the public portion. And Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you responded quickly to the staff report you received Thursday evening in the normal order of things, and we've given you much more additional information right now, and I saw many of you trying to skim and read it as I was presenting it to you. If you wanted to take 5 minutes to read it more thoughtfully, that may be an appropriate use of time before we launch into the next discussion.
I've seen 2 council members that would like that. I think I'll make that 3. So, Mr. Councilmember Brzezinski.
And Mr. Mayor, and confirm our public has copies of this document that we presented?
We brought down 20 initially, and I think I saw somebody printing more. So.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to take a 5-minute break, give us a chance to read through what the manager is referring to, what you have in front of you. Each council member responded to each of these, but this evening we were handed the responses from the other 4 council members. So we have not all had a chance to read through them yet. And then we're going to take a couple of minutes and do that at this moment, and then we'll reconvene.
And Mr. Mayor, I will mention that with just a few exceptions, these are almost verbatim submissions of what the council turned in, and we also varied the order in each of the exercises, so it was to reduce the ownership of any of the ideas, which is generally helpful to get to a visioning discussion.
Thank you. that we've had a chance to read the compilation of what we all wrote, we'll move on. Start with any questions from the council to staff. You're all totally cool with all this. Okay. Mr. Manager.
So now we come to the hard part of trying to do group writing in a public setting from a dais, and that is never easy. It's why typically our work is done with straw dogs being staff recommendations put before you, because it frames the discussion and lets you, as you frequently do, change and modify those as you think is in the best interest of the community. And that's why we never put weight behind staff's recommendation, except as a tool to help you in your decision making. But that's not the process we're using tonight, given the feedback from the Planning Commission and Council on January 9th. So it's a tough challenge. We do have a piece of white paper here. Jessica Von Bork has far better handwriting than I do, and she will be a recorder for the council as you proceed. And I thought a good question to maybe launch off with, because it's clearly a key issue that many of you feel strongly about, but it's also one that can be subdivided and parsed down for the council to determine what you think the vision of the North 40 should be. And it's really getting to the core issue that I think was repeated in several of these exercises, which is the unmet needs of the town of Los Gatos, that the North 40 should meet unmet needs, and really engaging the council in a discussion of what do you mean by unmet needs? Is it for that neighborhood? Is it for Silicon Valley? Is it for the entire town? And how would you like to define unmet needs? If I was going back to my office to start crafting a straw dog vision statement for you to give to you to play with, unmet needs would be in there somewhere. But I think some discussion of what do you want to focus on with unmet needs, since it was mentioned by virtually all of you in different ways. So that might be a place just to start the council discussing what you think the priorities are, and some guidance that came from what you gave us previously is actually on 2A, if I can get there. There. So it's those first three and trying to parse those out as to how you would like to see unmet needs referenced in a vision statement for the North 40.
Who wants to start? Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm comparing and contrasting the vision 50 words with what should be in the North 40, and it seems to me that as I scan through this, it's the words after because in each of those specific suggestions that get us to the unmet needs. So, for example, it looks like every time senior housing is mentioned, there's a because statement, and it says there are not enough options, they don't have places to move to, we lack certain facilities. So I think that would be one example of one that we've already identified as an unmet need in one exercise that I think corresponds to the other. I'm seeing the same thing with the hotel conference center. It looks like every time that's mentioned, there's a because, and there's no place.
So
those are the only two that
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Was staff going to respond or no? Okay. I agree with what was said before and what I think was just said, that I think that the vision statement should be short. I think it should be very high level, meaning not specific. I believe the vision statement need not necessarily incorporate specific uses. I believe that is something that will be done by the North 40 Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission, and the Council once we have a crafted vision statement. But in answering specifically what staff has raised, which is whose unmet needs, region, state, whatever, when I use that term and think of that term, I am talking about the town's unmet needs.
Mr. Brzezinski.
All right, did you want to put some specificity to that?
Not at this point, because I don't think, if we're talking about crafting a vision statement, if that's what we're doing right now, then I would not put specific uses into a vision statement. I would craft a general vision statement that then would go back to the various bodies that are going to be looking at the North 40 specific plan, who will then determine what kind of specific uses are consistent with the vision statement. And let me use just an example, because being on the North 40 committee, I can see how this happened. If you say that one of your vision statements is that it addresses an unmet need, and that it an unmet need, and that it is an agricultural area. One of the things that came up and everybody has always liked is a ferry building kind of farmer's market. Every single person on our committee has always liked that. Nobody has ever objected to it. So why is that? If your vision statement is addressing unmet needs and it's looking at the agricultural heritage of that area, that's why. So I'm thinking that if we craft a good high-level general vision statement tonight, then the uses will come out from under that.
Okay, Mr. Brzezinski.
And I don't disagree that the vision statement should be high level and general, but I do think it's possible to get to the general from the specific, and that what we've got in front of us are some real concrete recommendations, either pro and con, that will help us understand not only what is acceptable to the community, but also what is unacceptable. And I think that will be part of the actual way we define it, rather than having just a general kind of umbrella statement. Keeping with the concept of unmet needs, yes, as pointed out by Councilwoman McNutt, senior housing and hotel conference center were both indicated clearly and specifically. I would also think that one of the unmet needs that I heard was that the northern part of the town in that section has little, if any, retail, restaurant, commercial opportunity accessible to the neighborhood. And so for my purposes, to focus on the unmet needs of that section of town would allow us then to begin to define what retail, at least one component of the retail that we're going to request out there. Yes, it did. Thank you. I would also like to second what Ms. Abati said about the schools. If you read through our specific language, even though it didn't come up in the general overview, it's referenced several times that schools and school needs need to be addressed. I don't, as the manager indicated, we don't own this property. Neither does the school district. And this is private property. But if there were a school somewhere in the vicinity of the North 40 or adjacency, i.e. Oka Road or somewhere nearby, that would go a long way towards resolving some of the major issues we've got that are generated by the school population. A simple result of another school site would be the moving of a lot of the traffic that's southbound on the Boulevard and University towards our schools down at the Blossom Hill Boulevard corridor, moving in the other direction, keeping people in their neighborhood, allowing kids to walk or bike to school in their neighborhood, because we know what kind of a complex mix of traffic impacts we have because of the isolation of this neighborhood from those schools. So definitely, even though it's not mentioned as a specific use, it's embedded in what we're talking about here. So that would be one of the things that I would like us to see as an unmet need, which would be for another school site for the elementary district.
Okay. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. I want to go back to what the Vice Mayor was saying, because I agree that the finished product that we want to end up with as a vision statement, the best vision statements are very broad. They really summarize in simple, clear, elegant language what the values and priorities are for this particular subject matter, whether it be a section of a town or a business or an organization. I think the advantage of doing some of the specifics as we talk about unmet needs or some of the other ones we're going to do is to make sure that when we say the word unmet need, what does that mean to us? Again, the Vice Mayor, I believe, was the one who mentioned, from her point of view, it's the town's unmet needs, which I agree with. I don't think we have responsibility in these 40 acres to try to meet the region's unmet needs or even West Valley's unmet needs, but we need to be concerned with our own community, our own town. In terms of the schools, one way to address that in a vision statement I could see would be to have a phrase that would say something like sensitive to impact on the schools, or sensitive to impact on school systems, because that does not say what the solution is, but it acknowledges that that's an important principle. So, for example, and I'll do a couple of extremes. Let's say the North 40 ends up being a combination of only senior housing and only commercial. That could be said to be sensitive to the schools because it would not be producing any additional students. It would not be a good place to put a school in the middle of senior housing and commercial, I don't think. So on the other hand, let's say the whole, again, I'm using extremes, the whole 40 acres was turned into single-family homes. Well, what would be sensitive to impact on the schools would be you'd have to provide a school for a neighborhood that was being created like that. So again, I think the more that we can take these specific ideas and concepts and then bring it back a step into some broader language is how we're going to get through this tonight by midnight. So could we put down sensitive to on there? Okay. Sensitive to impact on schools?
So one of the, I'll get to you in just a second. I do agree with the Vice Mayor that a vision statement should be broad and general and encompassing. The concern I have is if that's all we do tonight, we're not much farther along than where we've been for the last year because we haven't filled in anything underneath it. So I think that this is important. We may, it goes from the general to the specific and then back up to the general. So that's really what I was hoping to get through tonight. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Actually, if we come up with a 50,000 foot elevation vision statement, a good one, tonight, or at least the elements of one, I will tell you that we will be ahead of where we have been for the last couple of years or a year working on the North 40. So we will be ahead of the game. And then, again, what I keep balancing against that is that the council does not tonight tell the Planning Commission and the North 40, these are the uses we want. But if we have the umbrella that says, for example, sensitive to schools, that does encompass things like, well, maybe senior housing would fit under that umbrella, and maybe condominiums would not. And so with that in mind, and following Ms. McNutt's direction here, I would like us to consider sensitive to traffic impacts. And then, if I might.
Please.
The concept of having retail down there gets into a challenge with unmet needs, because, and it's a balance, and I don't have the answer to it. I can try and verbalize what the challenge is, but I don't have the answer. You say unmet needs, we say unmet needs, and then we go, okay, they're unmet needs for the town. Then if you have retail down there that is not provided anywhere in the town, then you probably are addressing non-competition with our core downtown center, our downtown. If you say retail and unmet needs, then you haven't given direction as to how we can have retail in the North 40 that does not necessarily compete with our downtown. And one of the things we've been struggling with on the North 40 committee is maybe doing that by the size of the pads and so forth. There are other ways of doing it, like not having any retail. But that is something that is being balanced in my mind, and I think in our committee's mind.
Okay. Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I look at the previous vision statement from 1999, it's very broad. It's about 4 paragraphs long. Pretty much covers a vision that I think is still very much applicable today. And I feel like we're spending some time trying to reinvent the wheel. Now, I know things change, and it's been a long time since 1999, and we have some very good ideas coming forth from the dais here this evening. But I think an approach to this might be to start with the existing vision statement and then apply some of these new ideas we've come up with here tonight and edit it a little bit. The idea sensitive to traffic impacts is already covered in the previous vision statement. So in some form, I just think it needs some wordsmithing. So that's the approach I think might be a good idea this evening.
Manager.
I don't want to respond to that just for the audience. Attachments 5 and 6 in the agenda packet are where you will find the vision statement for the old North 40 specific plan, as well as for the Los Gatos Boulevard plan.
Okay. Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to follow on the comments that Councilman Leonardis made regarding that vision statement from 1999. It's on page 2-1 of the document that is attachment 5. And I did some wordsmithing, so to speak, to try to bring it within the context of what we've been talking about in the North 40 committee, and also things that, interestingly enough, have been generated here tonight. One of the things about that master plan was I believe it in 1999, and then subsequently when it was looked at again by General Plan Committee multiple times, we were in a different economic time, and things have evolved since. But what we're looking at tonight is, I think, the ability to shape or frame the vision statement that was created there without having to necessarily reinvent the vision statement. It does include, in contrast to the Vice Mayor's orientation, some specificity regarding uses, but I think it's valuable. And I would like to just kind of overview a couple of the amendments or additions I'd like to make to that, if we could, at this time.
Right ahead.
And I think this is in keeping with what we've said so far. It states the North 40 area is envisioned to be comprehensively planned and developed. And I'm going to include residential and commercial mixed uses. Ms. Roach was the one who I believe indicated that there were no residential components in the original plan, and that is accurate because at that time residential was excluded because it was intended to be entirely commercial. Okay, so that's why I have inserted that as addition to commercial uses. In terms of a variety of allowed land uses, it would include retail, commercial, office, and so forth. I don't think any of the uses that we discussed in the North 40 planning process so far have been excluded uses. I think one of the issues for me, and I think for some of the other members of the committee, one of the issues has been that we've tried to be so inclusive that everything that is possible is on the table, rather than to say these are included uses, some of which will not be able to be accommodated because of the impacts or just the acreage, those kinds of things that have not really been discussed and that really need to be discussed as we go back to our committee. In terms of the target groups, as indicated, I'm going to go from kind of the immediate to the more distant. So for me, town residents within the North 40 area should be the first population we serve. And when we look at that population, then we would look at possibly some uses that would be more significant for them. And then the next would be residents of adjacent neighborhoods within the town. And as we've said before, I believe, there is a dearth of retail restaurant opportunities for people in the northern residential neighborhoods to access. A third would be then town residents in general. Fourth would be residents in adjacent cities. Fifth would be visitors. As I go outside town, those populations become less and less significant to me in terms of our service. I think pretty much the rest of it reads well. And I would be interested, as we develop that final statement we're going to attempt tonight, to use this as possibly a blueprint for how we establish that next contemporary vision plan.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, when we were talking about this session and how to structure it, I said that one of the interesting parts of my role tonight that's different than usual would be asking following and clarifying questions. And I do have one for the councilman if I could. In that with the addition of residential, was that focused on senior residential or just residential in general?
No, what I was focusing on is, and I was one of the individuals who indicated senior residential would be appropriate. I'm assuming whomever we select as the residential population, the needs of that property would then be directed towards the fulfillment of the expectations for that population. So if we've chosen a senior community, and we've chosen it primarily because we don't believe that we have a felt need for additional general population residential, then what would follow from there would be the opportunity for those individuals, those residents, to have their needs met within that site.
Councilmember Leonardis.
I was just going to concur with everything Councilmember Przinski said. Those were the two areas I noticed that needed changing, and everything else that we've already been discussing kind of fits the language of what's already there. So I just want to concur that those would be the edits I made, and I think we've made a huge step this evening towards crafting our vision statement with the existing vision statement. So.
Other input? Councilmember McNutt?
Well, I disagree, and the reason is this has been existing with the two minor changes that were just clarified. It pretty much covers everything that's been talked about in the specific plan up to this point. And what we have said is that the work done in the specific plan up to this point is off track and doesn't reflect where we want it to go. So if there's that disconnect there, then this isn't working. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think it's too long. I think it's too general, too cookie cutter. I don't think that it reflects the work that we did when you had that slide up that talked about that first exercise that had the, describe the town, describe your neighborhood, describe the North 40. I'm not seeing that reflected in these words. So I don't think it's been working, and I don't think minor edits on that is going to take us where we need to go.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I agree that I don't believe that the vision statement drafted for the draft North 40 plan in 1999 or whatever it was, that is not my vision of a vision statement. On page 4 of our staff report, there are two samples of vision statements that more reflect what I think a vision statement is. Again, much more high level, much more general, and then the uses are determined whether or not they fit into that vision statement, rather than have uses become part of the vision statement. The vision statement becomes the litmus test for certain uses. If you say, for example, unmet needs in the town, then you can say, all right, is senior housing an unmet need in the town? You go, yes, or if you think that. Or you say, all right, are condominiums or multiple family dwellings for families, is that an unmet need in the town? Maybe not. So that's why I keep going back to wanting a more general, higher level vision statement that then has the community, by virtue of the three bodies, fit in what the uses are.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
I don't disagree, but I do think that one of the reasons why Councilwoman McNutt noted that we have not necessarily gotten to where we wanted to go in the committee's progress to date is that we haven't been referencing the specifics of our vision statement, even from the 1999 document. It's never come up. I think the closest we got were the first two meetings when we asked the council and planning commission to comment on those things that they felt reflected the town's character, and then what would be appropriate to express that in the North 40. And then the first community meeting, I know, in rereading the minutes on that, again, very clear. I think there's some clear delineation of some of the characteristics of what this community wants to see in the North 40. Where we went from there to here, I think, is more a reflection of not having continued to reference back to what those earlier statements, what those earlier issues were, what the earlier concepts were that were expressed by the community. And I think it's really valuable for us to have gone through this last 8 months of exercise, not only to know some things that make sense to us, but also to know what doesn't make sense, so we can say this is excluded. And I do think that there can be bottom-up thinking that helps us arrive at what would be this statement. I don't think this is a very poetic statement. I don't think that's a poetic statement at all. It is actually something that is not very exciting. But I think it does capture, in so many ways, a lot of the things that we said as a community at the beginning of this process. What it needs, perhaps, is an overlying position that helps us craft kind of the larger view, but I would not exclude this as assisting us in moving forward. I just think we haven't been able or willing perhaps to reference to this as we've gone through this process.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what everybody said. First of all, the challenges that the North 40 Advisory Committee have had, I mean, there are probably many, and I don't think that it's worthwhile or profitable to discuss them or go through them. But one, I agree with Mr. Brzezinski that the process, the last 8 months, even though we weren't going straight down a line, were very helpful because you learn from all these things that you're doing or not doing. And secondly, I also believe that you can go from the bottom up in the sense of these are the things I want, these are the things I don't want, and so from that I will go to a very general statement. And it could very well be that that general statement is then followed on with the more specific things of the current North 40 draft specific plan.
Okay, so I'm going to weigh in real quick on the, I think that the current North 40 specific plan vision statement isn't really a vision statement. I tend to agree that a vision statement, at least what I envision, bad. Sorry about that. What I think of when I think of a vision statement is a 1 or 2 sentence, very broad, encompassing along the lines of, and I'm not throwing this out for anything other than just an example, would say something like, the North 40 should be in harmony with the rest of the Boulevard plan, consistent with the general plan, and serve the unmet needs of the residents of the area first and the town in second. Something along those lines, simple and short and sweet. But there's a difference between a vision statement and a vision. I have running through my head a whole bunch of things that I think that I do envision for the North 40, and some of them were already put up there, which are the unmet needs. And I'm not sure where the North 40 Advisory Committee got bogged down. Maybe there wasn't any attention paid to the current draft plan vision statement, but I think, or at least my hope for tonight, was to maybe fill in both of those, at least to some extent. Get a vision statement, that 1 sentence, 2 sentence type of that we can hold on to, general, and then get the council's vision to guide the North 40 Advisory Committee with where they go in crafting the actual specific plan. That was where I was headed, and I think we're starting down that direction. At least that's what my listening is. Councilmember McNutt.
So in terms of that second part, I think that the exercises that we did and the summaries, we should just turn that over. I mean, I think that gets to the second part of that. I still think we have some work to do on the vision. So,
on the vision statement?
The vision statement, I'm sorry. If we could come up with 3 or 4, and I'll use 3 because then I can use my hands to make a triangle, and I can't use my hands to make a square as easy. But if we could come up with 3 or 4 principles or values that would be the core of the vision statement, I think that would be really helpful, because then those become, you're almost creating a template then that you can put down on top of every idea that comes forward. So again, I'll use 3 because I can do a triangle. So you say we should have a hotel there, and so you have this, and you put it down on the top. So, it fits within that because it matches all 3 of those or all 4 of those. We should have senior housing. Okay. We should have medical office. Does it fit within those 3 or 4 principles? And I think those 3 or 4 principles, again, we have embedded here in the answers that we did from the exercises. I think they're there.
Want to take a stab at
If I could just, as I've clustered this, the unmet needs is the first one, and there is a further breakdown, which I think your discussion has progressed what's met by that. It's really the current town residents, be it changing demographics, as well as the immediate neighbors and residents of that area, and that's really the focus. The next 3, I think, cluster as possibly a second leg of that triangle that the councilwoman mentioned, which is it's not a separate standalone neighborhood that's completely different from the rest of the town, but you still feel you're in Los Gatos on both sides of the boulevard. It's not you're in Los Gatos A and Los Gatos B, you're in Los Gatos. Then the third leg may be more the infrastructure, character, and feel that's reflected on the right column with the hillside and the streets.
I'll jump in. I'm actually pretty good with that. Vice Mayor.
I am too. I'm trying to look at the description of the North 40 up there and put it into a triangle. Well,
Square.
I can do a square. But anyway, so let me just weigh. I think those could be grouped into 3 or into 4. But let me just weigh in on what I consider important in our vision statement. Obviously, unmet needs, and then when you have complementary, not competitive, completes Los Gatos is not an isolated island. Those all, in my mind, fit into the unmet needs. Then another important thing for me is our natural setting, which is the hillsides and the agriculture, and you have several on there. Historical legacy, agricultural legacy, mountain views. I can't see what's behind the head over there.
A new neighborhood, not unlike others.
Okay, then, so that would fit into this natural setting issue. And I may not have it. Oh, and then we get into, yes, the infrastructure, which would be not overburdening the schools, not, however you want to say it, not really overburdening the traffic, being sensitive to traffic. So that would be your infrastructure leg. Huh. I may have done it in 3 legs.
And just so that PowerPoint is a great tool to keep everybody on the same page, but we do abbreviate, and I do want to refer you back to sheet 1C, which has all the words you use, which provides a little more flavor under the convergence, and that's just an abbreviation of this. But
Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. Could you flip back to, okay, so we have leg 1 was unmet needs, leg 2 was natural centering, natural beauties, leg 3 was sensitive to impacts on schools, traffic, and so on. And so I do think there's a 4th, so you'll have to do the square for me since I can't seem to do that. Oh, okay. And that is this idea of neighborhood not unlike others, not isolated island, grown organically. One of the descriptions that I've used is when we looked at that flood inundation map. Do you remember? Should the dam fail, and it shows how the water and that's kind of how I view it. Los Gatos comes down and it just keeps flowing. Right now it kind of stops at Lark, so it just keeps flowing on out to 85. So however you can do that, but this idea that it's continuous, that it reflects what what exists elsewhere.
Well, that's where I was headed with it is a continuation of what exists as opposed to being.
Look and feel.
Yes.
So using sheet 3A, which I just referred you to, it looks like the 4 legs are on there. The unmet needs, the first bullet is leg 1.
Not 3A, it's the
excuse me,
third page of
1C.
1C.
It was a busy weekend with the library. I totally misspoke.
Was there a library?
So 1C, sorry about that. It's how would you like to describe the North 40, of which the slide is just a simple abbreviation of. So the first bullet under convergence becomes side 1. The next 3, the grown organically, the completed Los Gatos, and the look, feel, and density of other neighborhoods, those combine into side 2. Side 3 is without burdening the infrastructure, and it's streets plus, it's streets, schools, and more. And then the last 2 are really the environmental and natural assets. That's kind of what I'm hearing as your assessment.
Vice Mayor.
Maybe. I think I'm going to have to see it. When Ms. McNutt was going through it and when I was going through it, it made sense to me, but now I'm not sure what you said, so I'm just going to have to see what you said in writing.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
Actually, I do think it made sense. We will see it in writing, obviously, but as we have evolved our thinking tonight, I think we do have some good text already prepared to answer that question. And I do think that this will be very beneficial for the North 40 Committee to take a look then at uses. What I have heard consistently from the very beginning is that we do not want to create a separate downtown. We do not want to create something that's isolated. We don't want an island apart from the town. We want the continuation of the town. I think when Mr. Arze commented on the boulevard continuity with the North 40, I think that's a really significant component. I look at the boulevard in its current evolving stage as a linear North 40 that should be in some ways integrated with the North 40 up there at 85 and 17. And we have to pay attention to that, and the opportunity we have is to reshape the boulevard itself as we look at the concept of complete streets and the gateway to the community that the North 40 provides us, so that, as far as I'm concerned, when you come into town and you cross 85 and you start down the boulevard where the North 40 commences, you know you're in Los Gatos. And it's got to be a different experience, and that, I think, is part of the character that the committee and the community has been calling for when we had the discussion early on about this. I think the other part is the issue of the intensity of the uses that were proposed out there. I do believe that the numbers of residential units, the square footage of commercial offerings indicated clearly to the committee that those numbers were way too high and way too intense. And what we need to do is take another look at those and deal with the property owner and the developer and what kind of negotiation they can engage in to realistically look at how this can be developed within the context of the dialogue that we've had so far. And with that in mind, I think that that will go a long way to allowing the committee to go back and to reshape what the final outcome should be.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Actually, I think this is pretty exciting. I think that it feels comfortable. It feels right. I'm quite surprised that this is not midnight already.
Hopefully you're pleasantly surprised that
Yes,
it's not
I am.
midnight already.
And I do think it will help the the committee, but it will also help the interests that feed into the committee. We have the property owner's interest. We have the potential developer's interest. And so we had, and then we had the interest of the consultants, and then we have the committee. We had competing interests, and I believe that an overview of the vision statement will help us all and give us direction.
Councilmember McNutt.
Sounds like we're getting to concluding statements, so I wanted to make sure I had a chance to get one in, and that was that we have an excellent example of the importance and effectiveness of visioning over this last weekend with the opening of the library, because we had a clear, crisp vision, which was that we wanted to build an outstanding library for our residents for today and for future generations. That was the vision. And then we had to struggle with, where are we going to put it? How big is it going to be? How are we going to pay for it? How are we going to work in technology? What are we going to do about parking? What are we going to do about staffing? All of those details. But as long as we never wavered from the vision, everything else falls into place. And I think once we get a vision for the North 40 that we're all comfortable with, that is clear, that everything else is going to fall into place, because there'll still be a lot of discussion, there'll be a lot of disagreements, but as long as we don't lose sight of the vision, then we're going to end up with something equally as fabulous in the North 40 as what we have just over across the plaza here.
I'm going to ask a question of the two members of the council that sit on the advisory committee. Is this enough for you? Or do we need it wordsmithed into a specific statement? Are the four, I'll call them pillars, enough? What do you think that the advisory committee needs from us to continue to move forward?
I don't think it's enough just to have the discussion as our walkaway. I would like to see some statement that coalesces what we've been talking about. But there are a number of the committee members here in the chamber tonight, and I know they've been listening to what we've been saying. And I think that, coupled with a clear statement that summarizes what we have, where we have gone, will assist us definitely in moving forward.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. As one member of that committee, I could probably move forward with those 4 line items, but it would be even nicer to have them, put into a statement, such as some of the statements that you have, for example, the one on page 4. And also, what I'm finding in looking at the components that you have listed up there is that the vision statement of the general plan, which I think is really good, that is like a subset, but a consistent subset with our general plan. And I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Mr. Manager.
Some of the discussion I've heard tonight in terms of getting the 4 pillars for the high concept vision statement is very helpful, and I have a process suggestion for your consideration at the end. Second, I found the discussion looking at the old North 40 or the draft North 40 vision statement, really the changes that 2 council members talked about really, I think, targeted the definition of who's the audience for unmet needs, and that's really that hierarchy that was being talked about, which could inform the drafting of this high vision statement. The third one that I found very interesting was the notion that your comments and the summary that was presented, the detailed ones, not just the slides, being provided to interested parties, because it does start to make the criteria reflected in these 4 pillars of your vision statement real in terms of kind of the genesis of how they'd be applied. And I think that creates the give and take, that evaluation criteria and what you're evaluating is always a back and forth. So I think that set of materials going forward would be very helpful. The one piece that's missing is taking the 4 pillars and making it into a specific statement like those on page 4. And a standard process we've used for the library and elsewhere is for a 2-member ad hoc committee of the council to work with staff to bring something back for full council review. And that's a process this council's used effectively repeatedly.
And I think it'd be a whole lot smarter than 5 of us trying to draft it on the fly here. Councilmember Leonardis.
It's funny that you should say that. I took these 4 items and I just created, a couple sentences that begin with the North 40 shall meet unmet needs of Los Gatos, maintain its legacy and rural character, cause minimal impact on infrastructure, and maintain community continuity. And to me, it still seems like there could be more added to it, but I think with the discussion this evening, it's a start, so I don't want to be the sole author here.
Don't worry.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think, what's that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. No.
No.
Thank you. Because I think we will do an ad hoc subcommittee for that. We've got a couple of, Councilmember Brzezinski.
I just want to kind of do a little bit of house cleaning here. When Ms. Despars talked about our sitting as a task force to discuss the vision for the town, I would like to reference back to the general plan and the revised that we did, and in particular the vision of the town as indicated on VIS 2 and the following, because it really does reflect where the town sees itself right now. And given the fact that we have, this is the 2020 general plan, and our projection of who we are and what we are. And I would invite the entire audience, both here and those watching at home, to take a look at the general plan, particularly the introductory comments related to how we see ourselves. I think we'll all be very impressed. It's something that we should actually have an opportunity to reflect on regularly to make sure that we're fulfilling the goals, objectives, and vision that we've set for ourselves. But I think we've done a yeoman's job in clarifying this, both as the General Plan Update Committee, the Planning Commission, and the Council, with staff's support through these last several, it seems like years, but it's several months, to come to a point in our history right now where we can actually take a look at how are we doing. And I think that this exercise tonight should tie in very neatly with a reflection of the town as we see ourselves in general terms as a community.
Okay. I want to call the council's attention to attachment 9, which is under the next steps. And probably prior to number 1, which is the next advisory committee meeting, would be the ad hoc committee would prepare a vision statement, bring it back to the council for discussion and approval, and then enter into number 1, council representatives taking that vision statement to the advisory committee. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay. And comfortable with the remainder of attachment 9 as for the process? Not seeing any disagreement. Yes. Councilmember McNutt?
I don't know enough about the work of the advisory committee since I'm not on it to know if these are the proper segmentations of meetings. It seems to me that some of these could be combined or maybe not, but I would think we should give the committee the discretion to compact or reorganize or spread out their work however they think is most effective.
Mr. Brzezinski first, and then the Vice Mayor.
I would agree. Thank you for that comment, because this outline although seemingly appropriate, could perhaps be made more efficient. And the committee might be able to move more quickly down this line rather than having to set so many meetings. But I'd like to have the committee's input on that. Maybe this is our first item of business, is to check our calendar.
Vice Mayor.
I agree. I think crafting a vision statement, getting it blessed by the council, and then giving that to the advisory committee, I think that's good. In looking over these next steps, what I noted was there were a lot of words used like supporting goals, supporting design principles, uses and site planning components. To me, that was a jargon, a land use jargon, so I didn't even know exactly what our committee was doing. So I'm not sure we need to do all these things, but I guess the first thing would be to find out exactly what these words mean.
Okay. Staff have a comment?
It sounds like we'll take the next steps as well as the vision, once the council's adopted it, to the advisory group and talk through how they wish to proceed with staff and consultant support.
Okay. If the Vice Mayor is willing and Councilmember McNutt, I'd like to ask the two of you to serve on the ad hoc committee.
That's fine with me. Thank you.
Okay. To draft the vision statement and bring it back. Anything else?
Nope, there's a new library everybody should visit.
6,000 of you did this weekend. All right. Unless there's something else on my agenda, if I can find my agenda, and I don't see anything else on it. That concludes tonight's study session, and we are adjourned.